Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to the live. I apologize. I'm so sorry that we're a little bit late. We were just having technical difficulties. And every time I try to do a live, technical difficulties happen almost every time. And I know it's because what we're doing is important. The message that we have to give is important. And so there has to be a little bit of challenge. That's all I'm going to go with. There's got to be a little bit of challenge. So welcome everyone. Welcome. Here we go. Thank you for being here. We've got some really important topics to talk about today, and I'm so very happy that Rachel is here because her story is amazing. Everybody's story is different. Everybody's story is unique. Everybody's story is powerful. But that's what makes stories so powerful, is that we can see ourselves just a little bit and in each other's stories, right? The way that we connect to each other is powerful. The way that we have synchronicities in our stories is very powerful. And so I'm super excited to talk today. Today, our topic is what about church hurt and religious hurt? And this is a topic that you don't see a lot of lives on this topic. You don't see a lot of lives. There's a lot of lives on how to get more money, how to finish the year, how to manifest. There's a lot of lives on that, but there's not a lot. And there's not even lives on, how to get over fear and how to get over self-sabotage. But there's not a lot of lives touching on religious hurt and church hurt. And I have a feeling that the reason is because we don't want to step on toes. We don't want to hurt or disappoint or let down or offend. That's the big one. Offend people who it happens to be working for, people particularly in our lives. But it is a very, very important topic because there are a lot of us out there who are dealing with this, who are doing our best to heal through this. So I just wanted to introduce the topic first, but I want to go ahead and introduce you to an amazing lady that I have met and that we have just really connected. And so, Rachel, will you introduce yourself to the people? Tell the good people what you do.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rachel Woosley. I'm a spiritual alchemist, coach, and wellness consultant. So I kind of do a plethora of things, let's just put it that way. But mainly what I do is I take a holistic look at the body. I look at not only the physical realm, but also the spiritual, the emotional, the energetic realm. All of those things all play into the part of us coming to a place of harmony within our body, or balance, some people use that word, in our bodies, in order for us to be able to be optimal in everything that we do, in all the spaces that we are, and in all the roles that we hold. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I do.
Absolutely. And so very important. So everybody who knows who I am, you can see why, why now we connected so very well. Let me introduce myself to the people who don't know, who may be watching this live, and they're like, well, who are you? So I'm LaToya, and I'm an inner power coach, all things inner power. So the people who, particularly women are my niche, but people who have gone through the hurt that we're talking about today, or the people who have had traumatic experiences, drama in their lives, suppression and oppression from what I call the collective conscious. Maybe you've had a toxic boss or a toxic relationship. I myself am a survivor turned thriver of domestic violence and sexual assault. And so it's really important to me that I'm a part of the solution, helping people release the triggers, the baggage, the spiraling thoughts, limiting beliefs and understandings about themselves, so that they can love themselves, trust themselves, believe in themselves, and be their most powerful selves. I use EFT tapping and I use Reiki energy balancing and clearing to help get it out of the subconscious and the energy body, which is ultra important. So again, now you can see why we connected so quickly and so deeply. But really, where we started to connect deeply is this topic of experiencing hurt, experiencing healing, experiencing disillusionment, experiencing a lot of things that I think a lot of people are ashamed about, feel guilty about, have hidden in their bodies, that are carrying unnecessarily, right? not that it's their fault. This is the way that society has constructed it for us. But it is unnecessary. We're carrying it. And so, Rachel, I really just want to dive into your story if you're ready. And obviously I will share a little bit of my story in the weaving and the bobbing of, but I'd love for you to share your story. And I'm just going to ask you some questions and just really allow the space to open up so that people can relate, people can connect, people can allow themselves to open up and understand and relate, and then even maybe even get another level in their own healing process.
Awesome. Well, gratitude. I appreciate the opportunity to share. So quickly, my journey with religion has been a lifelong journey. So I was born into a preacher's home. So I am a preacher's girl or daughter. So you can determine which one I am, if I'm the good one or if I'm the bad one. So that's a stereotype we have. So you can pick and choose. I don't care. But I grew up in the church. And I'm very super grateful for my experience in the church. I mean, it was a path that I chose coming here to in this, time space continuum that we're in right now. And so I'm so grateful for the opportunity to experience that, because I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't experience it. And so for me, there's a lot of really good memories associated with my growing up years and my time spent in the church. But as I grew older and I began to become more into my own, instead of this preconceived idea or what I clocks, which was very much perpetuated by lifestyle, by the context of the religion that I grew up in. There were some conformity things that we had to adhere to. There was some I call them rules and regulations, and they're kind of unwritten, but they're just there. They were expected of you, and so these were parameters that were put on me as a child, and the people that put them there, they had the same thing happen to them, so they really didn't know any different, and so they placed that box upon me as a person. And as I grew older, there was things that I experienced more in the spiritual world, sensory type things that I experienced that no one could explain to me. And I would ask questions and I would seek help. And pretty much everybody just told me to be quiet because they thought it was kooky or weird or witchy or woo-woo, or they didn't know the answers. Is really what it was. And they just didn't know how to deal with me. And so
I want to ask you a question real quick before you go on, because I could tell already that people are like, that's me. That was mine too. But I would love for you to talk about, if you can, if you're comfortable, some of the things, right? Some of the things, the rules and regulations, the box, right? Because that, I think, is what has a lot of people trapped, has a lot of people stuck, especially now when we're trying to clear beliefs about ourselves, beliefs about gender, beliefs about money. Like, we're trying to clear those things. And a lot of people, I think, don't even know where those blocks are coming from. So I'd love for you to talk about just a little bit of that box.
Right. So a lot of it is based upon misinterpretation of scripture. So like talking about the financial piece. Blessed are the poor. We've all heard that. If you've you've heard that statement. Blessed are the poor. Okay. Sorry, God, whoever you believe created this world, which I believe God did, he never wanted any of us to be poor, as in we think of monetarily poor. And so that would be one constraint that we could go on and talk. That could be a whole nother live in and of itself.
Like on and on and on.
On and on and on. But the second one would be more, because we're females, would be more the constraint of like your role as a woman and what you were supposed to do, especially in relationship to a marriage or it was marriage between a man and a woman. That was the only way that could be constructed. But how you went about doing that was, for me, it was be this, and do this, and do this, and do this. Very much.
No, Rachel, no. Let's make it plain. Let's make it plain.
So for me, I was told to be a nurse, a teacher, and a good wife. Find a husband that could take care of me.
Okay, so let me tell you, I gotta say it because what's so crazy is I know we come from very different denominations, right? But when I was doing my bachelor's of theology in the denomination that I belong to, um, I was sitting in a class. I was the only female in the class, and I was sitting in the class when the pastor has told them, "You want to marry a nurse or a teacher." Or a homemaker. That was the exact phrase that was used. And I know some people can be mad. Some people watching will be mad at me right now, but I'm here to tell the truth. That's why I was put on this planet, to tell the truth. And that is what was told in that class. And and it didn't matter that I was there, right? They completely just like looked over me because they didn't want me to be there in the first place, because women don't do theology, right? So I'm so glad that we just stopped to make it plain, because here we are. I was in Mexico doing my undergrad. Okay, so here we are, two totally different parts of the world, two different denominations, and that was the message.
That was the message. And I even faced a similar situation later on in my early 20s when I went through the ordination process. And even though the movement or denomination that I was involved in recognized that, the process was very different. My husband and I actually started the process within like 3 to 6 months of each other. And every time it came for me to pass the test that they had for me, which meant going in front of individuals who were all male, and which many of them were my advocates outside of the room, but once you got inside of the room, it was a very different feel. And so I kept coming up against resistance and resistance and resistance. And so it wasn't until I had shared this story with somebody that I served on a board with. I was a board of directors, running an organization as a woman in the ordination process, and I was recognized as by them until they heard that, and they actually showed up at my event where I was supposed to have my ordination, and they had denied it.
Wow.
And they petitioned and petitioned and petitioned for it to go through, and it finally went through on a contingency. And it's been in a contingency ever since.
Isn't that, because that word literally just pierced my soul right now. That word literally pierced my soul. So what are some of the things that, fast forwarding a little bit, I'd like to talk a little bit about your awakening, because the truth of it is when you're in it, you're so indoctrinated. I'll just make it plain. Part of the hurt that I'm still healing from and that I'm still dealing with is the I don't even know how to say it. The trauma. I'm just going to, I think, because I can't find another word for it. The trauma of defending the denomination and these rules and regulations that don't support me, accept me, include me, uplift me, verify me in any way, right? And as a theologian, having to find the theology and the apologetics to support that, to defend that, to preach that, if you will, right? And being a part of this whole movement, but not movement. Do you?
I totally know exactly what you're saying. And I mean, so much gratitude for the fact that you're there. Like, you've come to the awareness that you're there. And that, I think, for many people is where they kind of get stuck, because they've got feet planted in two worlds.
In two worlds.
So they're still holding on to all of these belief systems that they know they don't want to hold on to. But they're trying to figure out the new belief systems, and really it's a new identity. And that's what I work with people is, this is a new identity. And that's the transition I went through. And I started it about 10 years ago. And I'm going to tell you, I was super pissed off at people. I was mad.
Were you?
I was angry. I was bitter. was
Were
hurt.
you more angry than hurt?
I was more angry than hurt because and I was more angry, honestly, at myself. I
Talk about
felt,
that.
yeah, and I want people to really hear that. Like, I was angry at the people who did this to me. And I've had many discussions, like with my own parents, about this, and gone through the healing process with them and vice versa. And they are some of my greatest advocates now. And I'm so grateful for them. But the thing was, is I was angry because I fell for that bullshit. Excuse my language. But,
No, but bring it. Bring it.
that's what I felt like. And I'm not knocking. Let me just preface this, because I know if there are people who are in the church listening to this, be very careful, because I'm not knocking God in any way, shape, or form. I have an amazing relationship with my Creator God. I have an amazing relationship with Him. And I'm so grateful that I am where I am now, because the person that I was in that framework was a framework constructed by other people.
Yes.
It wasn't my relationship with my Creator God. It was my relationship to those people, and their relationship to other people, and their relationship to other people. And then eventually maybe it got to God. There was all of these steps and processes that
Hierarchy.
higher, and it wasn't necessarily hierarchy as in positioning, but it was just things as in be this, do this. Women can only do this. You should be a good mother, and you should do these things in being a good mother and a good wife. They were all constructed in this framework, which that was all the people that gave it to me understood.
Right.
I was angry because they did it, but I was really angry at myself. So I had to forgive myself, and then I had to go back in the process and realize that that's what they knew, and they did the best with what they had at the time.
They did their best with what they had at the time. And really that's what it boils down to, is still they are doing their best with what they have. And that framework, which I still call, part of, a sub community of the collective conscious, that this framework was created to what they believed would be best to further society, right? To further society along. It's what they believed was best for the community, for the greater good. And 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 I tell people this all the time. What they believed was for the greater good was not necessarily for your greater good.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
For your greater good. And now that we're in the process of finding out what is for my greater good,
Yes.
it is a strenuous process. It can feel stressful. It is a healing process to now begin to feel into and to know your identity apart from the identity that was given to you for the greater good.
Yes. Absolutely.
And it's really important because and that's hard. When you take it on as your identity, it's hard. It's hard to take it off. It's hard to separate. It's hard to realize that really is not the organic, the original you.
Right.
And I wonder, and there's a lot that comes with that, Rachel, right? That guilt, shame, hiding, doubt, fear,
worthiness.
Which I think is the biggest one.
Yeah.
Worthiness.
Yeah.
Worthiness.
Absolutely. Because I'm worthy in my Creator's sight, but not necessarily always in men's sight. And
but not necessarily.
Because I only care.
Rachel,
I care about how I think and how I feel about myself and how my relationship is. If yours is different and you're doing it the best way you know how, then go for it.
Then go for it. Absolutely.
Go for it. Absolutely go for it. Because I'm going to be here to cheer you on as long as you're doing the best for you.
And here's the thing, though.
For them.
Here's the thing. And here's the thing. Because tell me if I'm wrong. When we were in it, there was a sense that it was the best for me.
Yes.
Right. And
And we did great things in
And we
that.
did great things in that
We
framework
did
at that
do
time.
at that time with what we knew. But once we know more, once you start on this healing journey and you choose to take possibly a different path from an organized religion, let's just call it what it is. It's an organized religion. It's there for a purpose and a reason. We all have our own thinking on that. But when
Right.
you make this choice, you can't go back. And if you do, it is most people there's a physical manifestation of that. And I experienced that because I was so entrenched in trying to figure out my new identity, because there's some things that are still very similar to what it was.
Right.
What people that knew me 20 years ago, they would look at me and they go, oh, well, you're the same person. But if you sit and talk to me for any length of time, you know I'm not the same person that I was 20 years ago, because I've never been really good at sugarcoating anything, but I'm really not going to sugarcoat it now. And I'm not going to not share my story, and I'm not going to not listen to people's story, because their story is of value wherever
Yes.
they are.
Yes, absolutely. And and it's so important for everybody to know that, right? Your story is of value wherever you are. And in that, right, just piggybacking off of that, wherever you are, just encouraging you that when you feel the inclination, when you feel the rising, when you feel the wait a minute, right? Because that's what it feels like. Wait a minute, right? When you feel that, to be kind to yourself, to be graceful to yourself, and to allow yourself to feel it. Because
Yes.
I didn't for a long time, but to allow yourself to feel it and then allow yourself to explore yourself,
Yes.
right?
That's the hardest, but the greatest thing is
Mm.
learning to love yourself again. Because
Oh,
it's that child, I mean, and we're going to go back to religious terms, it's that childlike faith that we like to use that piece of scripture so readily, but then we want to squash that in the next moment. But that's going back to that like essence of who you are. Like for me, it was running and jumping in puddles of, which it doesn't rain very often. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, so it doesn't rain very often here. But it was running and jumping in puddles with my children when it did rain, and being free and like frolicking in the rain and not giving a crap about what anybody thought of me. Like, am I going to be this? You know, it wasn't that. It was just my freedom. And my kids were like, oh my gosh, mom's like a total kid. And now they realize I'm really a kid at heart. Like, I love to things like that. I want to experience things. But that's the essence of who we are. So that discovery sometimes is scary for people. But
yeah.
if you can push through it and you can have people like LaToya and I help you through the process and be there as advocates and cheerleaders for you, then when you get on the other side, and you're never truly away from it, it's always going to be part of your story. You're going to
Yes.
journey through that, but you got to have
Yes.
people champion you along the way and support you along the way, because the people that might have supported you most likely won't support you in this process.
Okay, so can we just take a minute to talk about that? Because that was one of my deepest fears. And and it took so much. I'm just gonna be honest, everybody. It took so much energy healing to get through that.
Yes.
Um, it, it really did. And to even to be able to trust that more community would come, right?
Yes.
That people who that I would be accepted again by somebody, right? By people who were aligned the way that I am now aligned, that I would be accepted and loved and not condemned for the rest of my life.
Right. And that's most people's biggest fear in any healing journey, is that I have to lose something in order to gain something.
In order to gain.
And unfortunately, that for me was something that I was taught, that you give and you give and you give and you don't expect anything in return, but you really, really do.
Right.
Because
But
it's
you
valid. The ego. Let's just call it what it is. That's complete and utter ego, and that's a whole nother life. But you can talk to LaToya and I about that one. But it's really
Forever.
forever. But that really is what it is. Like when you go through that ego death, and that's really what it is, because most of when I work with people or talk with people, we're in the grief process. That's
Yes.
really what it is.
Yes.
We're grieving the loss of ourselves.
Yes.
We're living the loss of maybe a familial, it's probably family, a church
Yes.
family, a community, this body
Yes.
that was there to support us. And then you lose this identity. You like it's a house of cards just crumbles and you don't know where to start. And so there's pieces of the old and pieces of the new that you're trying to integrate together. And that becomes very difficult. So oftentimes we default one way or the other. A perfect example of this is I had a issue with one of my children. Let's just put it that way. They weren't doing what they needed to do. And I got very upset with them and got very loud vocally with them. I yelled at them. Let's just be honest. I yelled at them. Hey, we're all human. I yelled at them. And the next day I was doing some work spiritually with somebody and they kind of called me on the carpet with that. They're like, have you done that? Because your energy is really like kind of aggressive with that today.
Oh, wow.
I had to like step back and realize it wasn't my child that was the problem. It was me that was the problem. It was me because something that happened with that incident triggered in me something that I've been dealing with and healing from. And I wasn't quite through that process yet. I'm still not through that process. There's still things that I'm working on with that aspect. But then I realized, wait a second, I had to go apologize to my child, my entire family. Like, I was a complete and utter jerk, and it wasn't towards them. It just brought up something in me. But knowing that awareness, I can't go back and not apologize. Like that would be so hard for me. But if I wanted to maintain that and be right and righteous and always have control and all that, man, it would have eaten me alive for days and days and days. And for me, physical manifestations usually come out of that. I'll get really sick and my body will not function. And so I know when I like, those are things like you become so aware of that. And it helps you heal because you see the things you don't want to do.
And here's the thing, for me, well, not necessarily for me, but I'll just say it. We say that it's not, but it is. A lot of times, the visual is so important. What people see, right? The appearance is so important. And sometimes that gets in the way of going to apologize, being vulnerable and saying I was wrong, being vulnerable and saying I have this issue, being vulnerable and whatever it is, and not you necessarily, right? But people who have addictions or anger issues or all these things, and because because the appearance is so important, right? That you must appear righteous, that you must appear in control, that you must appear that, your faith is through the roof. You must appear that, all the things. And I could go on and on.
Well, pray it away.
And here's the thing. I need to say this because this came up with a client not too long ago. I'll just say it that way. That, this person was told, well, if you had enough faith, that this wouldn't be. And I have heard that over and over and over again. I've heard it preached. I've heard it, spoken over. And I just want to say this, right? That not necessarily, sometimes, okay, I don't know if it's the organization or the denomination or the religion, whatever, but it's the words, right? It's the words that's preached over you that can keep you captive. If you let's just talk about that, right? And now as a society, we've come together and now we're talking about, you've got to repeat in the mirror, I am enough. I am enough, right? You've got to feel that. You've got to move into that space. You have to understand that you are enough. And now the question is, well, where did the not enoughness come from, right? And if you've been sitting under preaching that has said, well, if you had enough faith, this wouldn't have happened to you, or you would have cured this, or this would have been gone by now, or whatever, X, Y, and Z. Well, if you had faith enough as a mustard seed, but clearly you don't, right? So now
Right.
this enoughness, I'm just going to make it plain. And I've not really talked about this before, but so important that people understand that some of this is in fact what is causing the block, causing the fear, causing the self-sabotage, causing
Right.
the low self-worth, this not enoughness. We don't even realize that it's coming from some of the things that we have sat under for so long.
Absolutely. And I think it's because we've forgotten that we're all souls living in human bodies.
Living in human, all of us.
We're not humans telling souls what to do. They already know what to do. they already know how to function. We're just getting to be a manifestation of that and display that. So we can either do it, and this is what I tell people all the time. If religion is where you need to be, stay there, but do it correctly. Do it correctly. Do it like if you the scriptures, Quran, whatever you follow, whatever scriptures you follow, but do it correctly. Do it.
Understand.
Understand.
I would
it.
say understand what in fact your religion actually says.
Yes.
Versus
what it teaches.
What it teaches.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also
yes.
we have to understand that the interpretations that we often read are very dumbed down in a way, like not saying that we're dumb, but they are dumbed down so that everybody can understand them. And in doing so, we've lost a lot of what words mean, especially in the English language. Our language is so saturated. And especially in our culture right now, language seems to be so important to people, but it's really not important to them. It's only important when they can justify this us and them mentality, which is totally what a lot of us were taught as children.
Us and them.
Us and them. So it's us that are saved and righteous and those that are not. And the words are what's in between that. And the nature of those words, the spirit of those words, and the heart of where it comes from is so imperative. And so when we project those words onto other people, so case in point, like I use the word toxic because trauma to me is like I have had trauma, but religion to me was super toxic. And there are things that happened in that were traumatic, but they weren't necessarily like it was probably verbal abuse to some degree, but I wasn't physically abused like some people have been in the church. It wasn't, I wasn't there, like I didn't suffer any physical trauma from it. And I know there's plenty of traumas, so don't come at me for different traumas.
Right.
It was super toxic. It's like being in a toxic marriage or in a toxic twin flame relationship or a relationship with anybody. Like those things can become toxic. And when you realize that it's not for you, step out of that and go find what is for you. And in that process, that grieving process, just like if it's a toxic relationship with a spouse or a partner or a friend, when you leave that, it's a grief process. There's a separation there. There's a loss. There's a change in roles. There's a change in what you do with your time and how you spend your time. And when you go through that loss, you have to heal, because if you don't, then you transplant all of those feelings onto the next relationship or the next experience that you have. And so that's all the time what we see, especially with clergy like you and I, in congregations, that they're hurt. They often get sent to the next congregation, or they go to the next congregation and they're hurt from the old stuff that they've had to deal with here or there or in their families, and they're taking all of this baggage and they're expected to be not have any of it. And I'm like,
I am so glad
holy cow,
I'm so glad you brought that up.
We can't expect a man or a woman who has been damaged to go and preach the gospel damaged and not expect something to happen. Like, come on. they're still a human, but they're a soul. They're suffering, and we oftentimes we just bypass it, and we bypass people in the pews like that too.
And
Like,
I was just going to say that because even so, the person, like you said, this is the clergy that has been, offended or has committed the offense, and now has just moved on, right? As if
nothing ever
whatever,
happened.
as if whatever, right? Like exempted from needing to heal or needing to transport, needing to. Okay, so all those things, right? When we do that, though, we're also creating secondary trauma in the
Yes,
person in the pew. Who
right.
knows, right? Because we're just assuming nobody knows, so we're just going to shift it over. But what's happening is the person in the pew is seeing or understanding or knowing, and now they're having secondary effects from this because this person also was not allowed to be human. This person was also not allowed the space for the healing that needs to take place, the vulnerability and the humbling that
Yes,
that needs to take place for transformation, right?
right.
Um, and not so that they can continue ministry and sacrifice and X, Y, and Z. No, so that they can be a human being.
Mhm. Yeah,
Right? So
absolutely.
I'm so glad you brought that up because a lot of times it creates anger in people when they're like, oh, they just shipped them off to another city. Oh, they just moved them to another church, right? It creates anger. But what we
Right.
don't understand is that anger lodges in our subconscious, lodges in our energy body, and creates dissonance within us.
Yes.
Um,
Absolutely. We see that in
right?
relationships all that, like we see that especially like in family relationships, because most people who have some type of anger issue, let's use anger because that's what we're on, have an anger issue, it's a lot of times, you know, like with me, like one of my anger things, and I thought it was somebody else, like in my family unit, that was to blame for it. But then when I realized and I started peeling the onion back, it wasn't even that person. It was somebody else had given it to that person, and that person had given it to me. And I was like, okay,
Right.
y'all can have all of that back. I don't want any of it. That's not my anger. And we're holding on to things that we
Mhm.
don't even own. And we're
Mm.
not allowing ourselves time. Because, like, for me, and not everyone can do this. So, I know that not everybody can have a set period of time, but like I did, I took almost a year. I took almost a year off of social media. So I got rid of toxic things. Okay, so like
Mhm.
we're on
Mhm.
social media,
Mhm.
but at the time it was toxic. So I released that relationship with that toxic. There was people in my physical realm that I needed to release. I love them and I
Mm.
go because you need to go somewhere else because for me you're not working right now. And I hope
Right,
maybe
right, right.
become friends or whatever. There was businesses I let my business go at the time because for me it was not healthy. And I let those
Mhm,
things
mhm.
go and I replaced them with what most people would see as very selfish things but to me it was self-care. I needed to take care of me and I really needed to heal because if I was doing those things and I was in those relationships, all I was going to do was keep damaging it.
Keep damaging. Wow, so powerful. So powerful. And what a powerful thing to say. I needed to allow myself the space to heal. And what's so crazy is that we're still battling with this idea of what is selfish, what is greedy, and what is okay when it comes to being able to care for yourself, love yourself, right? Pour into yourself, do for yourself. It's crazy that we're still battling with this idea, and I'm so glad we're doing this live because we've got to know that these ideas we were not born with. We didn't come here with the idea that caring for ourselves was selfish, that loving ourselves was greedy or self-centered. We didn't come here with that. So
Right.
now I'm going to ask you the question, where did it come from? And some of it came from some of the pulpits that we have been sitting under, and
Right.
that's just the truth. And so
Right.
being able to sit here with you and then talk about it and say, okay, this is something that we're healing from and we're moving forward in. And how powerful for you to say, I'm taking the time to just care for myself, let myself heal, weed out the toxicity, right? Being able to remove the toxicity so that now you can set the healthy boundaries, because this is the other thing. So much talk about boundaries, 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 boundaries. And we're trying to set these boundaries with the toxicity still inside.
Yes.
You setting the boundaries, but the toxicity is inside. Not
Absolutely.
healthy. Not healthy.
Because
Right?
for most people, they don't accept their responsibility in that. For me,
In
that was the
that.
biggest thing I had to do was I had to accept responsibility, and what I didn't realize at the time that it would eventually do. And this process takes time for each person differently.
Mm-hmm.
Develop
Mm-hmm.
gratitude for the experience. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, for I would say 80 to 90% of my experience, I am super grateful for it
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
I was able to step out of it. I was able to let those toxic experiences, relationships, emotions, feelings, pains, hurts, fears, what the whole plethora of it. I was
Yeah.
able to take that and put that over here, and I was able to focus on Rachel and who was Rachel and who was Rachel to become, and who was
Yeah.
I. Almost, it was like rebirthing myself into being the person that I wanted to be. And
Yes.
there were still toxic things that were in my world, so I'm not saying that you can get rid of all of them, okay, but
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
take responsibility that I'm 100% responsible for everything I do. It is not my mama. It's not my daddy. It's not my husband. It's not my kids. It's not any church. It's not any societal thing. It's me. I make the
Right.
choice
Right.
behind.
Right.
I make the choice to be angry. I make the choice to, lead from ego or lead from humility and compassion and empathy. I choose to be in relationships with certain people, and I can make the choice not.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's my choice, and that's where
Yes.
I think a lot of times in the healing process we keep circling around the blame game, and we don't
Yes.
take enough time to sit in the mirror and really get angry with ourselves, really hurt with ourselves, really look at ourselves and go, yeah, I don't like that person sitting in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to
Mm-hmm.
like that person, but what are you going to do about it? Are you going
And
to stay,
right.
or are you going to change?
Exactly. Exactly. And exactly. To sit there, to own it,
Yeah,
right? To own it and accept it, and then move from there.
absolutely.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. And we've gone way over time now.
I
But
didn't even know
because
what
we
time
could
it was.
we could sit here and talk about this all day. But
Yes,
I yeah, but we need to end now. We should do this again and
absolutely.
really just get into the weeds of some things that we know people are struggling with and
Yeah,
questioning and trying to make sense of,
yeah,
especially women, to be honest.
yeah.
So, Rachel, I am so very grateful for you being here, for you sharing your story. I know that this is big. Anytime someone shares their story publicly, it's huge. It is huge. And I know that this is big. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story, for being vulnerable, for being bold and courageous, and for stepping out into what is your truth. So, if people want to get in touch with you and talk more, how can they do that?
The easiest way to connect with me would be through like Facebook, Instagram. I'm under my name, or you can email me at rachelwoosley@gmail.com. Super simple. And just connect with me that way and reach out. Especially if even if it's just questions like, hey, I saw the live, I have this question. What do you think? Where should I go? Because that's the thing. Oftentimes, even as coaches, there are things that are within our parameters that we will work with, and then there are other things that may not be. So we have resources to give you and people to give you. I'm going to kind of plug something that I'm in the works of doing is I'm establishing like a cool cohort mastermind of people who have been coming out of toxic religious culture. So if you're somebody who's experienced this and you don't know where to go and you kind of want a group setting where I will facilitate and we'll work through some of these steps, on how to do this process and how to do it without hurting other people in the process, and creating this new identity, reach out to me, because I would definitely love to invite you to be a part of that community.
Absolutely. And I think it is so important because, again, one of the biggest things that we fear when we are coming to a new awareness, or trying to heal from some things, is losing the community. And so what a huge thing that you are doing, creating the community that people can step into. Just like, when people are leaving like a domestic violence relationship and they can go to a community, support group or something like that. How very awesome for you to have this group where people can openly be able to question and get some answers and have some understanding and explore themselves in support and acceptance. So I think that that's absolutely needed. And one of the reasons why we connected so well, and I'm like, yes, 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 Rachel, I'm so glad that you're doing this and that you're following your light and your calling. And I love it so much. So everybody connect with Rachel Woosley. I put her name in the chat. Hit her up on Facebook, LinkedIn, all the things. And let's go forward, everybody. Let's elevate each other, support each other, uplift each other, and go forward. So it has been a wonderful time, everybody. I'm sending everybody much love and power. Catch me on the next live. Always bringing you power, inspiration, and motivation. Awesome. All right, everybody.
Gratitude.
Bye.